Welcome to another episode of On the Issues with Alon Ben-Meir. We are happy to welcome back to the podcast Moshe Ma'oz, Professor Emeritus of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and a previous director of the university's Harry S. Truman Research Institute for the Advancement of Peace. In this episode, Alon and Moshe discuss Israeli perspectives of the last 2 years of conflict with the Palestinians, global perspective toward a Palestinian state and a two-state solution, and the still indispensable role of the United States in finding a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Good morning, Moshe. Good afternoon there in Israel. Again, my dear friend, I want to thank you so much for taking the time, especially nowadays, because of what's been happening in Israel, what's happened between Israel and the Palestinians over the last 2 years or so. And obviously, it is extremely troubling for so many people, both in Israel, in the diaspora, and many of us are good friends around the world. But I wanted to start this conversation with you with one question, being that you are a historian, a celebrated historian for that matter. And ask you the question, when you look at retrospectively, going back, and you see what happened over the last 2 years, and what Israel has done in Gaza. How do you see that, say 10, 20 years from now, how do you see this, what the people would be thinking or saying about that particular horrific period in Israel history?
Yeah, obviously, it all depends. What you just said all depends on the future of Gaza and Israel and the Palestinian issue. The Palestinian issue remains the most important issue between Israel and the international community, not to mention the Arab world and the Muslim world. And Israel is now, because of its misbehavior the last 2 years and more, Israel is regarded as a pariah state. Whatever Israel is doing, look at the demonstrations all over the world, also among Jews in the United States. I mean, I just read some survey that many Americans, most Americans, deny Israel behavior or criticize Israel behavior, and they support the Palestinians. Yes, Israel retaliated very harshly against the October 7th, 23 massacre and attack. But then Israel went further. And it was a matter of revenge, a very sadistic revenge that killed at least 70,000 Palestinians, mostly civilians, women, children, and the world cannot forgive. Unfortunately, most Israelis also are supporting this massacre, the Israeli massacre of the Palestinians. So, let alone the international community. I talked to friends in Europe, in America, including Jews, Israelis, and they cannot explain the situation. And it's going to take a very long time to heal this wound. And the solution must be a Palestinian state. And this is, of course, included in what I prepared, that you know very well, the document, a Trump's document of the 20 points, which has some directions, shows direction towards the Palestinian state, not immediately, but in the near future.
Well, Moshe, before I get into that, I wanted to discuss a specific point that is people do not want to talk about because it is quite sensitive in the sense that Hamas's attack on October 7, 2023 is obviously not acceptable under any circumstances. It was vicious, it was barbaric, so there is no way you can justify that in any manner or shape. However, it is also being taken out of context. That is, this attack did not come just from nowhere. That is, when we are looking at the history, we're looking back as a blockade of Gaza for 20 years and so, the occupation of the West Bank, the building of the settlement, the repression of the Palestinians over decades. All of this anger, resentment, hatred, resistance is being building up and building up. And then they look at themselves and see, what kind of a future do we have? And every Palestinian who can look at themselves and say, we really don't have any future given what Israel has been able to do. And the international community pretty much has done nothing to stop Israel, specifically the United States, which in my view has been complicit all along. So Hamas's attack, although unacceptable, it's been also taken out of context completely. It did not come from nowhere. So that's one point I want to make. The second point is that whereas Israel has every right to retaliate, exactly what you said, Moshe, you're correct. It moved from just retaliation to punish Hamas for the attack into a war of revenge and retribution. Beyond that, this particular government, the Netanyahu government, the extremist government, saw this an opportunity, a golden opportunity, basically, to take over Gaza again and celebrate what at one point Trump suggested, get rid of the Palestinians altogether, get them out of Gaza into a different country. So what happened here, and from a historic perspective, this is not just an attack versus retaliation, but it's often taken out of context and how the Israeli government attempted, and Netanyahu and his government still do. Now, they're insisting they will not leave Gaza, like the defense minister said only recently. So I wanted to respond to that from your perspective. Am I looking at it from a crazy perspective, or is this exactly what is taking place?
No, you're right. People really miss to discuss the background of the 7th of October. Not that it's justified. It's not justified. By no means. But unfortunately, Israel contributed to it, as you suggested. So many years of occupation and settlements, and not only settlement, pogroms of Jews against Palestinians. And as you know, the Hamas called it Tufan al-Aqsa, the flood of Aqsa. Israel encroached and attacked the Haram Sharif, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Temple Mount in so many, and it's an affront not only to the Palestinians, to the Arab world, and to the Muslim world, and they couldn't forget. Right. And this has been going on for years and years, and we're warning the government, especially as you mentioned, the new one that was created in December 2022, is the most extreme anti-Palestinian. Now, what we have to do is to try, as I said time and again, to approach a new road that even Trump suggested. Not only to leave Gaza, as you know, Israel left, or the IDF left about half of the Gaza Strip, and there are chances, if Trump continues to pressure Israel, to leave all of it. But this is not enough. What is important that Gaza Strip will be under the PLO, not the Hamas, linked to the West Bank, again, PLO, reformed PLO, as Trump suggested, and leading towards a Palestinian state. This is the only way that Israel can become again an acceptable state in the international community. Because what you see all around is Israel is under boycott in so many fields. I mean, in my field, the scholarly field, we don't get any invitations to conferences, to write articles and what have you, because of this. The same with yes. Cinema and plays and what have you, music.
Right. There are a couple of points I want to mention to you. You speak about the plan, Trump plan. I think our listeners ought to hear, to understand that every single administration, going back even to 1948, had been advocating a two-state solution, with no exception. But every single administration has never really taken a concrete action, putting the kind of pressure necessary on Israel to move in that direction. So they were basically talking. Another point that I want to mention to you, during the 2 years of conflict, of war, the United States been supplying Israel continuously all the weapons, all the munition it needed in order to commit what I called early on genocide. So the United States was directly, both the Biden administration and the Trump administration to this day, directly complicit into the genocide that has taken place in Gaza. I mean, I cannot be persuaded not to believe that at all. To me, this was a clear complicity. Now, when we talk about the peace agreement, let's look at it now today, 20 points. From the time Trump offered this peace plan, was there any progress made on the ground other than Israeli troop withdrew from half of Gaza? Not a single Arab country is prepared or willing to offer any troops in order to maintain the kind of solution that we are looking for. Netanyahu and his government still refuses adamantly not to allow the PLO, like you said, and to form any kind of government where Hamas and the West Bank will be governed by a Palestinian authority. That's not taking place. Katz just recently said, we will never withdraw from the rest of Gaza. The continuation of the settlement is taking place. The harassment of the Palestinians in the West Bank, they're getting killed day in and day out. And tell me, what is it Trump is doing about that? As we speak, the situation is getting worse by the moment. So all this fantasy about 20-point plans, peace plan to eventually lead to a Palestinian state, to me, it's nothing but empty rhetoric until I see a real action by the United States, which is the only country, in my view, the only country that can, in fact, influence Israel to do the right thing. And it's not doing that. It has not done so in 70 years, and I don't believe it's going to do so anytime in the near future. That's my take. I would love to hear your take on that.
I fully agree with you. And of course, Trump is unpredictable. Nevertheless, what he has done is taking steps in the right direction. I mean, to mention the Israeli hostages. Who freed them? Netanyahu? No. Trump. He did. He forced Israel to withdraw from half of the Gaza Strip and to commit itself to full withdrawal. Of course, Israel is reluctant to do it, and especially makes a condition that Hamas should demilitarize, which Hamas is not doing. Also, Trump suggested in his 20 points document, he hinted that the future leads to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Yaret, I hope it's going to happen. Don't forget, at least it was mentioned also in the document, that Trump himself, in January 2020, he suggested a Palestinian state, not a full one, fractured, divided, it's also still a Palestinian state. Also, in his document, he accepts the Saudi-French proposal of 22nd September 2025 about the creation of a Palestinian state. And he has, and I must read it to you, I'm sure that you know it, while Gaza redevelopment advances and when the PA, the Palestinian Authority reform program, is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to a Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. Of course, it's words and what have you, but don't forget, Trump is also related, influenced by the Saudi Arabia, by the Arab and Muslim world, and this is exactly their purpose. And I want to go back to the Saudi Peace Initiative of 2002 that speaks about peace, normalization, and security with Israel of all Muslim and Arab world, provided Israel accepts a Palestinian state next to it. There are many issues. Just to mention one of them, which I've been working on, Jerusalem. Biden didn't mention, I'm not speaking about West Jerusalem, East Jerusalem. And according to the Palestinian demand and the Arab demand, the Muslim request, is East Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount, Haram Sharif, should be part of a Palestinian state, a Palestinian capital. And in Israel, there is a total rejection to it, even among the leftists, not me, but many others are against this. The majority of Knesset members, the Jewish ones, are against not only Jews, the Palestinian state. So it will take a great deal of pressure and conviction by Trump for Israel to do it, but Trump must save Israel from itself. And Israel it depends very much on Trump. I hate to say it, there is no God, there is Trump.
Well, I'm saying, we've seen that kind of documents before. You can go back to the Arab Peace Initiative more than 23 years ago, and basically talking if Israel make peace, the whole Arab world, the Muslim world will make peace with Israel and all of that. I honestly feel still today, I'm sorry to say, extremely pessimistic, because Trump, exactly what you said, he wants to play everybody. He wants to please the Saudis. So he has come this kind of document. The question is, it's not writing a document and writing a point. Everybody can do that. I've done it before. You've done it before. Here's a roadmap, how to get from this state of affair into a coexistence based on a two-state solution. Again, I always go back to the premise here. What action has the United States in fact taken in order to move this process forward, other than talking about it? Today, Trump is busy with Venezuela. Now he is talking about taking the Greenland. What happened to his peace plan since it wasn't introduced? What country has agreed to come up and provide a peace force, security forces? What action has been just recently stopped 20 agencies from providing the supplies of food and aid and medical supplies at will? And the United States practically has said nothing about that. So, and then you still have a government in Israel that it is as strong as it has ever been before. And everybody thinks that the new election, Netanyahu may very well win one more, that it could again might capture the relative majority and form the new government. I don't see any bright side to this day, because I go back to the same premise. There's only one power, and that power, the United States. The United States, because of domestic political reasons, because of the evangelicals, because of the conservative movement, those who believe that Israel is a holy that cannot be touched, that is the conduit for the Messiah to come back. I mean, they are not prepared. They are not prepared to take any specific action to force Israel's hand. And so where do we go from here? That's what I'm looking for, because we heard the same statement for 70 years. Nothing has changed. In fact, Israel has only entrenched further and further and further. And now half of Gaza is under Israeli control. And there's zero sign, in my view, that Israel is prepared to withdraw from the other half at any point in time, let alone agree to a Palestinian state, and let alone that's going to be a Palestinian state along with the, governed by the PLO. And there's another point I want to mention, but not now. I'd like you to respond to that.
No, but Alon, you live in the United States, and as I suggested, things are changing. Majority of Americans, including Jews, support the Palestinian cause rather than Israel. And Trump should adopt the suggestion of Bernie Sanders to impose sanctions on Israel, to withhold weapons, money from Israel until Israel yields to the quest. It's in the interest of Israel, because if there is no Palestinian state, it's going to be an apartheid, which is already there in many respects.
Well, I agree with you. Of course, it's in Israel's interest. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any almighty to impose on Israel. Only Trump can do it. Otherwise, Israel is going to explode from within.
Well, you just said, Moshe, you're right. Why isn't he imposing sanctions to force Israel ahead? Why isn't he stopping the supplies of weapons that Israel is using day in and day out to kill more Palestinians? Why isn't he taking? That's what I'm talking about. Concrete steps to send a clear message, not just to the Israeli government, but to the Israeli public, and say to them, enough is enough. The best thing for you, the best thing for Israel's future is peaceful coexistence with the Palestinians based on a two-state solution. That's the only way, in my view, Israel can survive, and perhaps over a decade or two or three, restore some of its moral standing. Today, Israel is basically morally bankrupt. But again, no steps are being taken. And that is really my problem with this administration, with the previous administration. They keep talking about two-state, but they're not taking a concrete action. And you just said it. Why isn't he imposing sanctions? Why isn't he stopping the flow of weapons? But there's another point, if I may raise that with you, Moshe. Please respond to that. And that is, there's Hamas. Netanyahu felt this war will not end until Hamas is completely destroyed. Well, now we know very well that Hamas is not destroyed, and he's assuming now still authority at least in over half of Gaza. And Hamas is not going to be destroyed. Even if you kill every single Hamas fighter, the ideology will survive. The idea will survive. So in my view, if you want to have peace, what Trump should consider, ask Hamas not just to disarm, but if you disarm, you could become part and parcel of the peace process. Don't you think this is a critically important step to change the dynamics?
I fully agree with you. And I've suggested it in my articles and books that Hamas should be a political party, part of the peace process. And you're right. Countries don't want to push. And the Abraham Accords don't move because the Palestinian issue is not resolved. Most of the Israeli public is against. Only the United States can do it. And you can see alone, things are changing. I mean, take Saudi Arabia. The United States has done some business with the Saudi Arabia, also Qatar, without making any condition regarding the Palestinian issue. The United States is also moving towards Ahmad Julani from Syria without consulting Israel. So the United States is moving, not enough, but this is the only way to do it, a pressure for the United States. It's not going to come from within, because I know Israelis, and you know it too, after October 7, most Israeli Jews regard the Palestinians as enemies, arch enemies. They have nothing to do with them. So it must be imposed on Israel gradually, of course, not and show Israel that if Israel doesn't advance towards a solution with the Palestinians, no money, no diplomatic support, no weapons from the United States. Can Trump do it? I'm not sure, but this is the only way. Do you have any other suggestion?
Well, no. I mean, that's exactly what we absolutely agree upon. The United States is the key, but the United States has thus far did not act decisively. And I agree with you, unless the United States, Trump, whoever it is, act decisively, telling very clearly to the Israeli public in particular. And I want to touch on this point, that this situation after 70 years, it cannot continue, because ultimately Israel is going to be on the defensive, and it's already on the defensive. Israel today has no moral ground left in the international scene and the community.
Yeah.
We know that. But there's the public, the Israeli public, because you mentioned the Israeli public to this day it's against the establishment Palestinian state. They have bought into this argument over decades and decades and decades. The Palestinian state poses a greater danger to Israel's national security or national existence than the current status quo. After 70 years, they're still listening to the same song and dance. And today, the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians have reached a new low, never seen before. And the Palestinian resistance also did not work. So what I'm saying here, the Arab state, on the one hand, must begin to put significant pressure on Hamas and the Palestinian. Israel's existence is irrevocable. The United States ought to put real pressure on Israel to say that Palestinian existence is irrevocable. And both, you mentioned the Gulf state in particular, the United States ought to put their foot down and say, not just providing a 20 points plan, but actionable plan. This is what we're going to do tomorrow. This is what we're going to do in 6 months. This is what we're going to do in a year.
No, I agree. I agree with your analysis. I mean, I want to mention also that only a while ago, the Arab League denounced Hamas for its atrocities and said that Hamas should not have any control of Gaza and it should disarm. So there is a willingness there, but it's not enough, because Israel also has to agree to a Palestinian state. And as we all discuss time and again, the majority of Israeli Jews are against it. And they should be pressured and convinced by the United States. Israeli Jews listen to Trump. They still admire him. And they wouldn't have any choice if he does it. And I think this is the task of Americans, and especially American Jews, to convince Trump to go along this way, to exercise pressure on Israel to accept a Palestinian state, not tomorrow. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen, but gradually, at least to start with a statement of intention or something of this kind, that it's going and establish some committees to work in this direction. And of course, it means also in Israel major changes in the political system, no doubt about it. Especially, Netanyahu, because he's very, very adamant not to do it. But only Trump can convince him, as he did convince him in many other respects. So Trump is the key. And I hate to say it, but there is nobody else. Only Mr. Trump. Of course, he can.
Well, no. I mean, we agree. Not just Trump. I mean, any U.S. president, be that Trump or anyone else, has to do exactly what we are talking about. Taking a specific action in order to move the Israelis and tell them this is not going to happen. Like I said before, 80 years later, the relationship is worse than ever before, and it's not going to be any better. And the whole argument that the Palestinian state present an existential danger to Israel is completely baseless, when in fact the opposite is the truth. A Palestinian state living side by side Israel in peace, that is what is going to provide Israel with ultimate peace that it is seeking. Now, the other point, I want to mention to you is that you need, and what you are saying exactly right, the political system in Israel today is defunct. Other than Netanyahu, who is clearly in his coalition opposing the establishment Palestinian state, there isn't a party or a coalition of parties on the other side. Be that, Lapid and Gantz and others. They have not come up with a plan of action and say, we have to have an end to this conflict. Two-state solution is the only real solution, and here's our plan. Here's our plan. But they don't have no plan. They have zero plan. They are afraid to talk openly about two-state solution. So how do you figure that out? So the Israeli public is opposing it. There is no opposition political parties who are coming with some kind of courage and say, wait a minute, we have no future without settling this Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There's no future. So here's our plan. Whether it is popular or not, they need to present a cohesive plan, the opposition parties, in order to change the perception, the mindset of the Israeli public. And that is not happening. How do you deal with that, Moshe, living there?
Alon, I fully agree with you. This is very unfortunate. The only, I mean, let's state it. The Arab parties, of course, want the solution. All Arab parties, and the Arabs, as you know, in Israel, compose about 20% of the Israeli, but they are not in the coalition, and hopefully they will be in the future coalition. But and here we come to Jewish parties. The only party, Jewish party, which hints in this direction of a Palestinian state is the Democrats of Yair Golan. They are the only ones. And you are right, all the rest are against. They are against categorically. They suggest autonomy, all kinds of things. The suggestion should be, as Yair Golan says, a demilitarized Palestinian state in cooperation with Israel in gradual ways. And both sides, as you said, both sides will benefit. But Yair Golan, as in the surveys, only 10 members in the Knesset, so is weak. So it must be some pressure from outside. Otherwise, there is no way.
You mentioned before, obviously, even if there is a plan to create a Palestinian state, you cannot create it just overnight. It needs a process. So I'm going back to the plan you suggested, the Trump plan. The Trump plan should have attached to it a process which I've been writing about, talking about it ad nauseum, a process of reconciliation. That is the steps to be taken today to demonstrate to the Palestinians that Israel really willing to move in the direction of a two-state solution, starting with the West Bank, ending this whole horrific attacks against the Palestinians in the West Bank and pushing them out of their land, starting a process of reconciliation between the two sides, working together, trading, going back to the 80s when they were able to travel both directions. Create that kind of relationship, neighborly relationship. You need a process. You need to mitigate the hatred, the animosity that's been building up for decades. You need a process of reconciliation. So I'm saying, at a minimum, the Trump plan should have included a process like this, saying the Israelis, starting now, you have to stop the settlers from attacking the Palestinians. They can do so. For starting now, you have to put some kind of freeze on building a new settlement or expanding existing one. Starting now, you have to begin a trade relationship, much tighter trade relationship with the Palestinians. Create that kind of process to give the Palestinian real hope. There's going to be somewhere a light at the end of the tunnel. But there is no such a process either. The United States, Trump or his predecessor, nobody insisted on such a process, and without which you cannot just create a Palestinian state overnight. It won't happen.
I fully agree with you. What's going on, and which we mentioned time and again, there is a creeping annexation of the West Bank. Not officially, although there are parties who recommend it. But as we discussed it, settlements, hundreds of settlements are built, and they are occupying by force Palestinian lands, Palestinian territories. Not only this, many extreme Jews, with the support of the IDF soldiers, make pogroms against Palestinians and against their the sheep, and they even kill Palestinians, take their land, and the international community is silent. Of course, there are protests by Europeans and so on, but the United States does very little. So I think this is a very, very important issue. Not only Gaza, as you said, also the West Bank. And we didn't touch Jerusalem. And this is really the bombshell.
Well, Jerusalem is obviously a big issue, but even there's a will, there is an agreement to reach an agreement on a two-state solution. There are half a dozen possibilities of finding amicable solution to the future of Jerusalem. Just the same, it is not impossible. It's not impossible. Once you agree that coexistence based on a two-state solution is the only solution, let's now talk about the future of Jerusalem and find a formula that will be acceptable to both sides. I think there's several approaches to that. You wrote about it, I know. I wrote about it many times. Other people are writing about it. There are solutions if there's the will, but you have to start with the premise there's two-state solution. You cannot solve the future of Jerusalem unless you have a solution. It's an agreement on the future relationship between the two sides. So Jerusalem is a big issue, but it has to be considered or will have to be resolved in the context of a two-state solution once that has been agreed upon. And there's a process that is leading to that. It could take a year, 5, 6, 7 years, as long as there's a process and there's a target. And say, eventually, this is where we're going to end up to. But the problem here, Moshe, please let me know what your thought. Problem here, of course, process is necessary, objective is necessary, but what you're going to need also continuity, political continuity in Israel. That is, a political system is a commitment, that commitment should be carried through the various coalition government over the years. And how possible that might be. That is, even this, let's say this government commits itself to what we're talking about. Process of reconciliation, objective is a two-state solution, etc. Then in a couple of years, another year there's an election, there's a new government. What is going to take in Israel to bind future government to an agreement made by current government? What is going to take? You know the scene better than I do. What is going to take? Is it possible? Is it doable?
Now, first of all, you are right about the suggestions, solutions, programs. We have to mention Clinton. He had a very good plan for a two-state solution, including Jerusalem. But he didn't apply any pressure on Israel at all. And I must emphasize again and again, Jerusalem is so important to most Israeli Jews, and they say ministers of the government and of the positions say better to have a united Jerusalem than peace with Arabs. This is really the motto. And it will take only a pressure from outside, because that can change it. As I said, in the gradual form, not at one, gradual form, starting with the withdrawal from Gaza, and then part of the West Bank, and then coming to the issue of Jerusalem. It will take years. And there must be some committees, joint committees, Palestinian and Israelis, with the support of the United States, participation of the United States diplomats to push the process. Otherwise, Israel is not going to do anything.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? I mean, obviously, the United States is not acting decisively. So far, not much has changed. since he introduced the so-called 20-point peace plan. And you are an Israeli living there, anxious about the situation because it's every day people are getting killed in the West Bank and Gaza. The situation is getting worse. Where do you see this is going at this point, given what we know already about the peace plan, about the Saudis' position, about the Israeli political parties, about the current government? What is the prospect? What is the prospect of moving forward towards something more positive? Do you see any prospect? And what is going to take, Moshe?
This is why I emphasize that the 20-point document of Mr. Trump is very, very important because it has indications in the right direction. And again, Mr. Trump must push forward to implement his suggestions because the document is a very good one. The question is of implementation. And it must come from you people in the United States.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm not holding my breath.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Your viewpoint, your position is always wonderful to hear what it takes, and I always appreciate that.
I'm sorry also that in this session, although it was very productive, we didn't solve the problem. But it's a huge one, and we have to continue thinking in an original way. And I'm meeting so many people in this, including Palestinians, and this is what we can suggest. I wish you all the best. And
thank you, Moshe, as always. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person now, sooner than later.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice day.
All the best to you. Thank you, Moshe, my dear friend.
Thanks
Thank you again. All the best to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode on the issues. You can find this podcast on my SoundCloud page, and stay tuned to my social media accounts for the latest analysis and announcements.